Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be a video going over how the Vengeance VDH nerfs affect our talent build. Recently VDH got nerfed. Our silence got increased in cooldown to 90 seconds, duration to 4, soul cleave damage reduced, and cycle of binding instead of 3 seconds, now it's 2 seconds. So the biggest change here is that no matter what you do, even if you talent cycle of binding, you will never silence 3 times in a pack. So one of the primary reasons to not take cycle before was that basically if you didn't take cycle, you could not silence 3 times. But now even if you do take it, you can't silence 3 times. So that plus cycle getting nerfed down to 2 seconds has nerfed cycle quite a bit. I still think it's viable in a lot of dungeons, but a lot of the builds I was playing before, basically that force cycle, are being like replaced by this no cycle build that I've been playing. So we'll go over the baseline build first. So this is my quote-unquote full damage build. I call this baseline because it basically has everything you want except defensive talent. It has cycle, chains, and it has spirit bomb. If you want, you can play this build without chains. It's basically the only way I'll play this build in high key, because personally I believe you need 2 out of 3 mitigation talents in high keys. Mitigation talents being dark glare, feed, and extended spikes. I always want 2 out of 3. I'll go over which 2 I prefer later, but I think in high keys you generally want 2 out of 3 of these. So this is basically no chains and you keep cycle. This is fine, but in a lot of keys you do need chains. So the question is, what are you dropping for chains? So the next option is no spirit bomb. So if you play no spirit bomb, then you get calcified instead of perfectly balanced glaives for free. And then you also drop spirit bomb, because obviously it's a no spirit bomb build, and you get sigil of chains. So this build is a little bit worse than it was before because Soul Cleave got nerfed by 8%. And if you don't have Spirit Bomb, then like a lot of your globals are now Soul Cleave, even on AoE. And this is also nerfed a little bit because Cycle is not as important as before. I still think it's viable on High Tyrannical in some dungeons because your single target is basically the same as the quote-unquote full damage build. Like a single target is only a little bit worse, but the AoE is a lot worse, but the survival is a little bit better. So I think it's viable on Tyrannical, probably not as much on Fort anymore. Show the other build that I was playing before. I call this no brand spread. So I think this build I'm probably gonna be phasing this out, at least for me personally. One of the main reasons to play this build was that you got cycle of binding. Again, this talent got nerfed. Instead of burning alive. Now, basically the problem with this build is that it was a massive damage loss. You lose your brand spread, which basically means you lose your AoE burst and you lose some single target. But it was really tanky and it had all the utility you wanted. Like you still got the 3 silences per pack. You have Soulmonger, which none of my other builds basically can take without dropping focus cleave. And the damage wasn't that bad. It was only like 5 to 10% lower depending on target count. It was a massive pull. It was quite a bit lower than 10% actually. But yeah, it was a decent damage loss, but it was also really easy to play. So I actually like this build on a lot of fortified keys. But now that cycle's nerfed, I probably won't be playing as much. And now you're going to meet my new best friend, which is the no cycle build. So this is what we're showing at the start. Cycle of binding is nerfed. Not only, like I said, not only is it nerfed to 2 seconds by itself, it also, the fact that you cannot get 3 silences means cycle of binding is oftentimes, in my opinion, not worth it to take. A couple of other notes with dropping it. Ascending Flame loses a decent amount of value since when you don't have cycle of binding, in order to keep your tier set, sometimes you're forced to not overlap Sigil of Flame. Not overlapping Sigil of Flame makes the Ascending Flame lose a lot of value. I think on Sim it's roughly 3 to 6% damage loss to not take Ascending Flame, and you just get calcified spikes, which is roughly 3 to 5% on average damage reduction. But if you game it, then it's more than that. And obviously you do still get to keep chains, and you get 2 mitigation talents. All right, so there's the builds. I've been playing no cycle quite a bit more often now. Pretty much just been playing it every key just to see how it feels on Tyrannical, but we'll see where I actually end up. I think if you don't play chains, then you can just play this basically, which is a quote-unquote full damage build with no chains. But if you need chains, then I think no cycle is kind of the way to go. No spirit bomb can be also used in niche scenarios where the only hard part about the dungeon is the boss, basically, because no spirit bomb does have a higher single target than this build. All right, so those are the changes. If you want like dungeon by dungeon, there will be a spreadsheet linked below the video. Basically the same spreadsheet as all the other guides feature, but I did a few updates. Next we'll talk about the mitigation talents. So I've been getting a few questions about this. Extended versus feed versus dark glare. So like as I said before, usually I want to be zoning into keys with at least 2 of these. If you zone in with only 1, you will be tanking vials with your fates at some point. If it's a low key, that's probably fine. If it's tyrannical, it might just be fine too. Personally, I don't like tanking vials with my face, so I always play at least 2 of these. Which 2 is actually a heavily debated topic. Theoretically, extended plus dark glare is the highest uptime, However, this does mean that all of your defensive uses are highly scripted. Like you have to Feldev off cooldown. You cannot overlap spikes with Feldev except maybe the first one. You cannot spikes when you have brand spread. But if you do all that, then your reward is that this has the highest uptime defensively, and you also have more meta uptime, and meta is like a lot stronger than spikes. Personally, I prefer this build at super high haste because haste reduces your spike cooldown, so that kind of gives you a little bit more leeway when playing this build. And also I prefer it when the difficulty of the dungeon is bosses. Like if there's a boss that's just messing you up hard, Darklight Boon is a lot stronger against bosses. Feed the Demon loses a lot of value on single target because your soul gen is a lot lower on single target. So if there's a boss that's really hard, this is the build that I would play. Next we'll go over my preferred build, which is the double spike talents, Feed the Demon and extended spikes. Basically with these two talents, you can just spikes whenever the hell you want, and you'll probably pretty much have 100% uptime in any real pull. I prefer this when mitigating trash because on trash, basically a lot of the time you're gonna have to overlap spikes in order to survive, whether that's just because it's on pull, it's really dangerous on pull for VDHs or every other tank, or it's because, you know, just brand is not enough, or maybe you put your brand up too late, it hasn't spread everything, and you need to keep your spikes up. Whatever the reason is, a lot of time I find that you need to spikes like off script, and having these two talents basically just lets you spikes whenever the hell you want. Also, it takes less brain power to play this because you don't have to think about making mistakes with spikes because, as I said, you can just push whenever. Next, we'll go over this configuration, which is no extended. Personally, I think this is the worst of the three, but I've seen a lot of people playing it. Extended spikes, I think, is the best uptime talent. So this basically means you can Feldev off cooldown, and you can also spikes off cooldown. But if you make a mistake, like if you spikes one time when you didn't need to, this will have some downtime where you're tanking with your face. You might have to kite, but so that's why I don't like it. But you know, I've seen a lot of people playing it, so it is definitely viable. So yeah, that is pretty much what I want to talk about. The two mitigation options. Like I said, I prefer these, and the new build, no cycle. I think I'm going to be playing this like more than 50% of the time. You can probably just play this like all the time if you want. One small thing that I forgot to mention, if you drop Cycle of Binding, your Sigil of Flame uptime on the mobs is going to be lower, and that means your parry uptime is going to be lower from Illuminate Sigils. So if you track Sigil of Flame, which you probably should, on your targets, when it's falling off, like you should notice that it's falling off. You're like, oh shit, maybe I need to kite or use some extra defensive here. Just be aware of it because your Sigil Flame time is definitely going to be lower, especially with this build. Alright, that's it for the video. Thank you all for tuning in. Peace.